But in a situation where you find that a person look at the situation,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. But in a situation where you find that a person look at the situation,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying. Now, let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning on our review. Now, the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper is all about politics. It says, Osinbajo notifies Buhari of presidential ambition. And that's according to close sources as written by Daily Trust. And then you have the rider that says, why VP shelved today's meeting with APC state chairman. And then Tinubu's ambition, RCCG's memo on Osinbajo in tight corner, puts up Osinbajo in tight corner, actually. It says, President not averse to VP's ambition. And then the pictorial there shows you a man who is said to be a popular pastor, now arrested, concealing illicit drug at the Lagos airport. You could see that there in the pictures displayed there. Quite sad, really, to have some of these kind of stories come out. People that you thought, oh, these are, you know, leaders of influence in our society, but they turn out that they themselves are involved with this kind of practices. Beside the pictorial there, you see that manufacturers lament as diesel hits 720 naira per litre. You'll find details of that on page 7. ASU may declare indefinite strike today, and that's according to official. You find that on page 4. I ran away from Arabic school for fear of Koboko. And that's according to Obasanjo. Interesting piece. I believe you like it if you pick a copy of the Daily Trust newspaper. Other stories at the top there. Buni to preside over APC convention as bigwigs move to vacate court order. Imports, that's talking about imports, mixed reactions, CBN banks ready for price verification system. These are some of the stories, but quite interesting really when you take a look at that story of the popular pastor that is now being arrested. You know, sometimes it feels heartbreaking when you see leaders of thoughts, you know, engage in such activities. You know, the other time that we saw quite shocking, the revelation of security officials, such as, you know, the DCP Abakari, who's said to be involved with this, and then now a pastor. So it raises the question about, you know, when we see people on our, you know, pulpits for the Christians, when we see imams, when we see security officials, when we see politicians, when we see, say, maybe even in the judiciary, maybe lawyers, legal practitioners and the likes. And when we see them engage in certain kind of activities, you begin to wonder, is the society that we live in, is it living on fraud? You know, or what exactly? Because, trust me, and he was to use these drugs personally when he was embarking on a crusade in Kenya for 1 week. So sometimes when you hear them make remarks, you know, and, you know, they talk to a large number of people. Confidently, you wonder what kind of ideas that they are putting into people. Because definitely someone who is under the influence cannot, you know, really, you know, be very, very straight in terms of whatever he's going to be telling the people. There must be some dilution somewhere, you know, of facts, you know, and the truth, and, you know, some kind of falsehood somewhere, and all of that. So you tend to wonder, for people, human beings, Nigerians, who depend basically, or I would say completely, on some of these religious leaders, you know, leaders of thought, without sifting through what they are saying, you know, you think about the implication. and how that is going to, impact on our way of living in the country.
I really think Nigerians do not get surprised anymore, as we've seen a lot of these, propping up, and we're getting used to it. We don't get surprised anymore, and we've moved past it. When we see these things coming from people like this, as you've said earlier, leaders of thought, they're supposed to be the ones championing change, for our communities. Well, it's unfortunate that we get to see some of these stories, very, really sad stories coming from them. I really hope we move past this.
It also means that, people should be careful. Nigerians should be careful about what you hear and how you take it. Sometimes we take things hook, line, and sinker without sifting through, some of these thoughts that, that are being shared by certain people, but think about it. If you are just going to take that, without, going through and checking and verifying for yourself whether this person is actually on the right path, then you are going to be in deep trouble, because these days, there's more to the eyes, there's more to what we see, these days. You see a different thing, but it's like the more you see, the less you understand. So it's very important that you are, smart and, create that time to really go through and see through what people are saying, at every point in time. That's quite interesting. For the Daily Trust newspaper, let's take a look at others.
Okay, let's see what's happening on The Punch this morning. The lead story there is talking politics. Buni may head APC convention, uncertainties around zoning. And the writers there say President asked Yobe governor to lead party to national summit. And this is according to a source. Adamu may lose out as party throws open chairman seat tussle. Oshibajo to meet state chairman ahead of presidential bid declaration. You'd find other stories on the top on page 25. Gencos disagree with TCN over outages. Blame weak transmission. And on page 21 on the Punch, talks with Labour on fuel subsidy removal ongoing. And this is according to the federal government. On page 12 on the Punch, we won't make gunpoint negotiations with ASU, says government. NDLEA traces 4.2 billion naira to Abba Kyari, co-accused accounts. Okay, there we go. You see other stories on the Punch. Gunmen attack, abduct Punch reporters, steal phones, empty accounts. You find the details of that story on page 4 and page 5 on the Punch newspaper. Why 13 Kwara crash victims were given mass burial. This is according to the police. You see the story about Amotokun arrests Lagos-based businessman, 7 others for robbery, rape. And there's a very interesting pictorial there that shows Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other officials sharing their visit to, during their visits to hospitals in the Kiev region on Sunday. You'd find other stories on page 25. Bakers threaten shutdown as diesel price others soar. General Overseer heading for Kenyan crusade arrested with cannabis in Lagos. And on page 27, you also see the story about Obasanjo saying, I fled Arabic school for fear of Cain. You find the details of that story on page 27.
Well, quite interesting, really, stories that we are seeing. The APC, for instance, seem to be on virtually all the papers this morning. Buni, talking about Buni presiding over the APC convention. We look forward to seeing how that is going to play out, because the truth is, eventually, if he's not going to be the one to preside over the APC convention, then who will? And whether or not that will hold, with a person like the Niger State Governor, Bello, being the acting chairman of the party. The INEC has said that, they do not recognize any change in leadership of the APC, and that the APC requires at least 21 days. They need 21 days to notify the INEC before, they will recognize that. So you could imagine the kind of mess that, this will lead to if they insist on going ahead with the convention with the governor of Niger State as the chairman of the party. So quite a lot of chaos and the most difficult time for the APC, I believe. And, just not to forget to mention the story about Osibanjo also notifying Buhari on his own presidential bid. This is also putting a lot of things, putting a lot of pressure, on the party and all of that. The president is, away at the moment. And so we are hoping to see how the APC will be able to manage all of this crisis. The vice president is meant to have a meeting with the state chairman of the party, while some are saying, well, the whole meeting was about, is about the APC, the vice president meeting with the APC state chairman to, rub minds regarding his own political ambition. Others are saying, well, it basically has to do with the crisis in the party, and we are also gathering that meeting has been called off according to directive by the president because of the level of crisis that we are seeing within the APC. So we continue to follow up and to see how all of that turns out. For now, let's also take a look at other stories on this morning. Now, if you take a look at the Independent newspaper, Daily Independent newspaper, it has a lead story that says Nigeria loses 91.6 billion naira yearly to foreign airlines, multiple points. And then the next one there below, we won't outsource our primary responsibility, and that's according to the Minister of Defense, not Minister of Defense, Chief of Defense Staff. And then you see also Jankos link poor electricity supply to inefficient grid management. And then you see strike, ASU tackles FG over comments on UTAS. We are working round the clock to end fuel scarcity, and that's according to the presidency. Mining firms of FG 2.76 billion naira, and that's according to Nati. Cocaine deal, Malami denies exonerating Abba Kyari. Below the pictorial, you see a story that says MPLs may rise as CBN moratorium over COVID-19 ends. The last story at the very bottom, NDLEA arrests Church General Overseer with drugs in Lagos. These are some of the stories on the Daily Independent. At the very top there, you see also some stories talking about defection, why Umahi deputy may lose at appeal court. You'd find details of that there. The next one, court restrains APC from holding March 26 National Convention. So there's this whole lot of litigations and court cases about the APC convention, which is one of the biggest threats really for the party. So these are some of the stories on the front page of Daily Independent. But the one that I find very interesting is the one on ASU. We are also seeing that there are threats, that there's a likelihood of declaring the strike indefinite, by ASU, and I'm just wondering, whether we are ready to find an end to this industrial action by ASU once and for all. This is something that has lingered for quite a while, and virtually everyone is getting sick of it. Government itself is getting sick of it. ASU itself is sick of it already. Students, who are the receiving end are also sick of the whole strike action thing. So hopefully we'll see an end to it. But again, some of the, back and forth about, UTAS, IPPIS, between government and ASU, we had to see, the final resolution to that. There's a committee set up by the Ministry of Education. The Minister of Education in particular, Adamu, inaugurated that committee. So we hope to see what is going to happen at the end of the meeting. They are renegotiating the agreements that have been had back in 2009 between the federal government and ASU. So we hope to see how all of that turns out. That's that.
It's really quite interesting. And they're also saying that they're not going to be having gunpoint negotiations, meaning they are not going to be under pressure, by ASU, to have these negotiations. But we are really tired of this and really hope we hear good news, not indefinite strike coming up subsequently.
Truly, I hope so.
Okay, let's take a look at some more stories. The Blueprint newspaper. The Blueprint also leads with a story about the APC crisis. Court holds party convention indefinitely. March 26 date shaky. You see the riders there. Buni still in charge, returns soon. Zoning to be decided after governor's meeting with Buhari in London. Party to sue Tambol, Obaseki, or Tom over defection. You'd also see ruling party arrogant in failure. This is according to the PDP. And you find other stories right at the top on page 6. Garki Hospital concession, 703 NISA staff, 42,627 NHIS, FHIS enrollees, fate uncertain. It also see that FCTA wants agreement terminated in 1 month. 12 months is the ideal to tidy up, and this is according to NISA. You see a picture out there that shows you some of the 301 Nigerians, including those evacuated by the federal government from Ukraine via Budapest, Hungary, on arrival at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport on Sunday night. You'd see other stories on page 16 and 17. Malagi boosting Niger APC's visibility unity ahead of 2023. You'd see other stories. Oyetola committed to regular salary pension payment to review chieftaincy laws. And you see other stories on the blueprint this morning. Lekki Deep Seaport to contribute $360 billion to Nigeria's economy. This is according to the federal government. I only asked for further probe of carry, not exoneration, and this is according to Malami. Blackout. MBET owes us 1.644 trillion naira, Gencos allege. And on page 9, you see the story that says we lack $11.1 billion to construct Lekki Calabar rail line. And this is according to Amechi. The blueprint also picked up the story about the general overseer arrested with cannabis at Lagos Airport. And on page 23, fail queues, Kyari deserves commendation, not condemnation. And this is according to Yakase. These are some of the major stories in the blueprint this morning.
Well, quite interesting stories there. Of course, the stories are not, much of a different from what we've seen on other papers. Now, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper this morning. On the Nation, the story is, of course, always about politics. It's the seizing already. So, APC chair, pressure mounts on Buhari to drop Adamu. And then you see also El-Rufai Masari off to London on consultation mission. Buni returns on Wednesday and with not to take charge. I wonder why the reversal in the stand and in the position. Already earlier last week we were hearing that the new acting chairman, the
Governor of Niger
Bello, the governor of Niger State, is here to stay. And now all of a sudden we are seeing that there was a letter sent to the acting chair to take over leadership pending when Buni himself will be back. And then we'll also see other letters, sent to the secretary of the caretaker committee, and so on and so on. Different dimensions. We also heard other stories saying that, well, the president never gave his nod to anyone to take over leadership of the party, and so on. So, and then with the revelation of INEC itself also, that they are not aware, of any change in leadership and all that, and how that will, affect the convention of the party. So, obviously, maybe these are the reasons why we are seeing the reversal and the likelihood of Buni returning to take over, the chairmanship of the caretaker committee. And then other stories there. INEC should not meddle in party affairs, says Olawepo Hashim. You see also 2023, PDP opens defection talks with ex-governors, senators, and reps. PDP does not belong to Wike, says Obaseki. Russia-Ukraine war, a threat to Nigeria's food security. You'd find details of that on the Punch. on page 7. And then other stories, IMF to help Nigeria, others on debt tax. And then you see man laments 720 naira per litre diesel price as aviation fuel hits 600 naira per litre. While we sell petrol above 165 naira per litre by Ipman. You know, when you see, are these all the implications of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, or it's just a coincidence? You know, when you begin to see all of these hikes, you know, aviation fuel 600 naira, man, you know, 720 naira per litre, that's for diesel, you know, and all of that conversations. And then the fuel scarcity itself, you know, but we started recording this fuel scarcity even before, the Russia-Ukraine, you know, crisis. So I'm just wondering whether we are just taking advantage of the situations around the world, you know, to bring up some of these things. No one knows really. Well, that's that for the Nation newspaper.
Okay, let's take a look at some more stories. On the Tribune, the Nigerian Tribune. The Tribune leads with a story, as diesel hits 720, man cries to federal government. How federal government plans to reverse fuel scarcity. This is according to the presidency, and you see the details of that story on page 2. You'd find other stories also on page 8, page 2, and page 29. After 7 years together, I have no issues with Buhari. This is according to Vice President Yemi Oshibajo. Why Nigeria should lead talks for South Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is according to Bolaji Akinyemi. Terrorism. Nigeria will win. Nigeria will win. This is according to CDS Irabo. You'd find other stories on page 25 and 28. Why federal government must prevent another indefinite ASU strike. And this is according to stakeholders. 2023, capacity to tackle insecurity must be considered along with zoning. And this is according to Saraki. You see other stories also. Russia-Ukraine crisis. Nigerians may experience worsening food crisis. And this is according to LCCI. NDLEA arrests General Overseer with drugs at Lagos Airport. Seizes 40 parcels of cocaine, others at Apapa Port. You exhibit arrogance in failure. PDP replies Buhari, APC. You'd also see the story about APC CECPC. Odds favor Buni. Why APC is rethinking opposition to his leadership. APC governors regrouping behind him. Let us take heed to Buhari's admonition. This is according to Mustafa. And you'd also see my plans for women youth, Sani Musa. You see also other stories on page 6. Genko's Nation in Darkness because we are owed 1.6 trillion naira since 2013. And bet dispute power generators debt claim. And then you also see the story about fuel scarcity to end in matter of days, says federal government. We've been hearing that for weeks. I really don't know what's happening.
True. All right. Well, these are quite interesting stories. The stories about, you know, the general overseer who was caught by NDLEA with drugs is virtually everywhere. We're also seeing that concern raised by the LCCI, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, on the, you know, likelihood of experiencing food scarcity as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. Yes, we know that Russia is one of the major producers of wheat. And of course, where do we get our bread from? Definitely from wheat. So others have even said also we're likely to see the increase in the price of bread. Already we are suffering, you know, the brunt of increase. Bread, a loaf of bread now is going for about, you know, 600, 700 naira. So you can imagine when we see further increase in the price of bread. Now let's take a look at This Day newspaper. And on This Day newspaper, the stories are pretty much the same. You have the lead story talking about the APC moves to retain Buni as interim chairman. You see also Bello as acting chair. You would see John Akpanu-Dodehe's fate uncertain. And that's the secretary of the caretaker committee. And then the other writers there says, group alleges fresh plot to sack Yobe governor through court injunction. You see, party moves to have court injunction stopping convention vacated. Other stories there, Osinbajo, Buhari and I have not had any religious dispute in 7 years. And then other stories there, APC crisis stalls defection suit against Tambuwal, Otom, and Obaseki. Other stories, Janko's nation in darkness because we owe 1.6 trillion naira since 2013, and that's NBED disputes power Janko's debt claim. You'll see that at the very top of this day newspaper. I think these are the major stories on this day newspaper. Politics, politics, politics. It's all about 2023, really. If you just have a look at, all the front pages of our newspapers, that's one thing that you are likely to see. And the conclusion you are likely to make is that all the stories seem to be geared towards, the 2023 general elections. I think that for virtually all the stories, all the papers that we've seen this morning, with the exception of Daily Independent that, touches on the issues of the economy, basically talking about Nigeria losing 91.6 billion naira yearly to foreign airlines, multiple points. Aside from that, all the other papers are about the APC and its own national convention coming. Litigations are everywhere, and that's the major threat. In fact, it's not even about the Bello versus Buni, rivalry here now. It's about, the court cases that are in court, against, or for the National Convention of the APC. And we're all looking to see how the courts will determine these matters and maybe rescue the APC from collapse. Because, yes, this is huge. And especially if you look at, other grievances, in some quarters of the APC, the factions that we have across almost a number of states, in the country. One is left to wonder what is going to happen on the day of the convention, especially since the APC is the party that adopts this concept of, consensus in determining the leaders of the party, and by extension, of course, the candidates that will be holding a ticket of the party in the 2023 general election. So quite a number of issues really that we hope to see how it's going to play out. Another issue is about the defections, and the court cases as well. Following defections, we are seeing something that looks more like a new trend in Nigeria's politics. You have governors defecting, and the party is going after them to say, well, this is our mandate. Give it back to us. Since you are defected from our party, then you should find your way. You shouldn't be occupying our seats, because you are no longer with us in our party. We've seen that played out with the governor of Ebonyi State, Dave Umahi, and then we are seeing that there is likelihood of that happening too with the governor of Zamfara State, Matawale, and of course we are also likely to see that happens. Some are also raising issues about Ben Ayade, as also one of those who have defected and is likely to have the same kind of ruling on his matter. So we are following up with all of that, really. But let's take a short breather now, and then when we come back, we'll take a look at, other stories of interest on our page. Now we're taking a look at some of the stories on our front pages this morning. And obviously, like we said, some of the major issues are political issues that we are looking at. Now, another one at hand that, has been generating a lot of conversations, like we said, is about the defection of Dave Umahi and the implication, of it. That is the court order that followed that matter. Now, a lot of people are saying that could this be, something that is ushering something new to our democracy in Nigeria, because in the past we've not had, we've had defections, yes, We've had court cases, yes, but not as it affects governors and all of that. So there's this conversation about whether or not this is for good or this is not for good, because yes, we've seen this trend among politicians, defecting indiscriminately, if you may, from their political parties for minor reasons and all of that. And then there's also the issue about who has the mandate. Is it the individual? Is it a candidate? Or is it the party? So if someone is elected on a particular platform, the votes that comes to that person through that platform, does it belong to the party or does it belong to the person? That's a major conversation here, in the sense that if it belongs to the person, then of course the person can, defect and leave with the votes, that brought him into office. But if it belongs to the party, then the votes belongs to the party. And so if the person leaves the party, he ceases to have, the right to hold that office. And then, of course, others have raised question about, the jurisdiction, of the high courts in deciding such matters. Some are saying that this is not an election matter, that should be heard by, and that if it should be heard, it should be heard by, the tribunal, but not, high court. And if it's heard by high court, then what grounds is it using to really determine, some of these election issues? And of course, others have raised a question about, the fundamental rights of the governors, to belong to whatever association. Others have also raised the issue of the immunity enjoyed by governors, and that as a governor, there should be no case, against the governor in court, except and until when he leaves office. And so a lot of people are raising, that conversation. We also have the issue about, previous judgments that have been made, similar judgments, whether or not they can apply in these instances. We've had this kind of judgments apply when it comes to, lawmakers, National Assembly members and State Assembly members. But as to whether this applies to the executive again is also another debate that is ongoing right now. And then, of course, the implication of this on our politics. Will this bring us to an end, to this trend by politicians, ending, the
defections.
Yes, these defections that we see, every now and then.
One other issue, overall, that a lot of stakeholders have talked about is the inconsistency, in Nigeria's judiciary. I really don't know, how this pans out, but a lot of these court judgments, there's been quite inconsistencies in some of these judgments, and it's really
conflicts
damning.
Here and there. We wait to see what is going to happen to the governor of Zamfara State, who is himself, is having a similar issue, and then the Ebonyi State Governor, Ben Ayade, would also, be following up with that. For now, we'll take a short breather, and then when we come back, we'll be connecting virtually with our guests to talk about some of the economic stories that we see on our papers today, specifically as it regards the efforts to, preserve the foreign reserve, of Nigeria. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that they must look at the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that. But in a situation where you find that they must look at the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.